Another way to add additional realism to your scene is to create what's called indirect lighting. Now, this simulates the bouncing of light through the scene, and it can soften shadows and illuminate things that would not normally be illuminated. So let's take a look at how this works. I have a simple scene here, and it has just one spotlight, which creates a lot of very dark shadows. So if I render this, you'll see that I'm getting very dark shadows on the side of the building as well as on the side of the car. Now, if I save this out, let's go ahead and add in some indirect lighting. Now, we can do this in the Render Settings window. We go into the Quality tab of Mental Ray. We have a rollout called Advanced Light Sampling. So I want to change my indirect lighting or my indirect diffuse mode. By default, it's off, but if we want, we can turn on something called Final Gather, which works relatively quickly. So this is usually your first stop. This will create some bounce lighting and render fairly fast. So with that in place, let's go ahead and render. So just by turning on Final Gather, we've gone from this to this. So this is a great way to create very soft lighting. So all this has done is it's bounced light throughout the scene, and it's created a much softer effect. And this still only has one light in the scene. Now, normally to get this effect, you might have to add ambient light or something else to get this sort of effect. Now, another way to do this is to turn on what's called GI Prototype. Now, GI, or Global Illumination, is a more sophisticated way of calculating bounce lighting. So let's turn that on and do a render. Now, this render will probably take a little bit longer. So here we have the Global Illumination, or GI render. So this is this render, this is the Final Gather render, and this is the original. So you can notice that there's a little bit of difference between the two, and one is that the GI is giving more of a drop shadow. So you can see here under the trees, GI is actually adding in some shadows that would not normally be there. So these are things like drop shadows and that sort of thing. So it's a more sophisticated way of rendering. It gives you a little bit more effect, but it takes some render time. So one of the great things to do is that when you render, go ahead and turn on Final Gather and see if that softens up your renderings.